Welcome and thank you for joining us today. I'm Sim Siegel, founder and director of the Columbia University Enterprise Risk Management Program and president of Synergy Consulting. This is the third in the Frame Your Future series. Excuse me. In each of these conversations, we convene 2 or more degree programs to explore a complex and timely question or idea. In particular, in addition to faculty and thought leaders, we're particularly pleased to include the perspectives of alumni who have used their experiences at Columbia to advance their careers. Today brings together representatives from the Enterprise Risk Management and Actuarial Science programs to talk about responding to shock. Joining me today are John Ankow. John, is Senior Director of Business Operations at Toronto Community Housing Corporation. He has previously served as Director of Enterprise Risk at Trillium Health Partners, and he is alumnus of our ERM program. We have Ben Shu. Ben is Actuarial Analyst at Milliman and alumnus of the Columbia University Actuarial Science program. We have, Marshall Ma. Marshall is Technology Risk Analyst at Goldman Sachs and an alumna of our ERM program. We have Tanya Manning. Tanya is leader and chief actuary of the U.S. Wealth Practice at Buck Consultants, and also serves as a member of the Board of Trustees of the Actuarial Foundation. Tanya has served as president of both the Society of Actuaries and the International Actuarial Association. And currently, she serves also as lecturer in the Columbia University Actuarial Science program. I want to welcome our panel and thank you all for making the time to be with us today. To our audience, I want to remind you to keep an eye on the chat. Feel free to ask questions now or share your thoughts throughout the program. We have colleagues monitoring the chat and they will reply in real time. So ask your questions during the program. There is no separate Q&A at the end. I want to start with Tanya. If I could ask, you serve in 2 different roles at Buck. Can you talk about the different risk perspectives involved in your chief actuary role versus your practice leader role?
Sure, Sam. As a chief actuary, which is a very different role depending on which business you're a chief actuary and which company you're a chief actuary. But in my chief actuary role, my primary concern is the risk that's involved in the clients that we serve. I work in the area of pension consulting. So most of our clients are companies or large trusts or cities or states that offer pension plans to their employees. And embedded in those plans are risks that the contribution requirements would be more than they would expect or they can sustain is primarily the risk that we're looking at. And I, as chief actuary, am making sure that the services that we're delivering to those clients is at the top quality and is accurate, and that my employees know exactly what they're doing and how to deliver that. So there's a lot of risk in the service delivery, but more importantly, there's the risk that they have to manage within the plans themselves and how they're consulting with the clients and doing their actual works and setting up their models. As the business leader, my risk is, of course, the service delivery, but it also gets more into the operational and enterprise risk aspects, as you can imagine, where we're making sure that we have the optimal amount of resources, which are generally our employees, and that we are delivering in a very efficient manner, and that we have all of the tools in case there is some sort of shock or change to what we're doing, such as everyone having to suddenly be remote, as we saw in 2020. But we're very much focused on the results as a business leader and making sure that we have the right amount of employees for the right amount of demand for our services, and of course, that we are responding to any changes and trends in the market so that we remain a viable and profitable business.
Thank you for providing that, Tanya. I think it's a good representative from sort of both, you're teaching in the actuarial science program, but both from the actuarial perspective, because I don't know if our audience all are aware, but in terms of responding to shock, so actuaries have to bring pension plans is some of the most challenging projections. You have to think decades into the future and think about the financial security. So actuaries are trained to look back decades, looking at experience of cycles, wars, famines, economic upheaval, pandemics, and project way into the future. So it's a very challenging and exciting field. And in your other hat, the overall practice leader, of course, thinking top line, bottom line responsibility, you got to think strategic, operational, all types of risks, so more the holistic type of angle from an enterprise risk management program. So thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
If I could, I'd like to move to Marshall. Marshall, at Goldman Sachs, you work on risk and technology. Can you share with our audience just a little bit about the areas of focus in your work? What type of risks, what type of projects do you focus on?
Sure. So our team is about technology operational risk. So we basically perform as a second line of defense. So as we know, the first line is awareness, second line is risks, and the third line is internal audit. So my work involved in several areas. The first is about the incidents. So our team monitor and review all the technology cost or technology related incidents. We kind of do the real-time monitoring, but also do the ad hoc analysis for all the risks in the firm. And secondly, we conducted a risk assessment. So we do the monthly and quarterly risk assessment using the results to perform the second line of the risk defense to challenge the first line, namely the engineering team in our firm. And also for me, myself, I involved into very interesting projects. So the first is the dashboard project. We're trying to use more quantitative approach to measure the residual risk and also use the results to relate it to the risk assessment and also the risk appetite statement. And another project I'm involved in is to building the resiliency framework in the firm. We're trying to build a technology resiliency framework to ensure the firm can operate and continue to serve clients even when the significant events like pandemic or natural disaster happened. So we're able to continue operating and continue to serve clients. And our team looks the risks more from the technology perspective. So we look through the different lens like cybersecurity, cloud security, data privacy, or foundational infrastructure. Everything related to technology is under our domain and we need to look at it. So basically, these are all like my current works and areas I'm involved in. Thank you.
Yeah, I see that smile on your face. I don't doubt it. So this is a very exciting and hot area. And it's something that, of course, enterprise risk management prepares you for. It's not just cyber. There's a much broader range that you're working on technology, and that's a certainly exciting area. Learning and understanding how to quantify it and figure out what your exposures are, what the limits are, how it plays into risk appetite. You need the quantification to do that. A lot of firms are lacking that. So I think you're having some fun times helping organizations do that. So
yes.
That sounds exciting. So I'd like to, if I could, move on to you, John. You work in the public sector, excuse me, for Toronto's public housing department. From what you've seen, how would you compare the state of ERM in the public sector versus the private sector?
So Sam, generally speaking, when you compare the state of enterprise risk management in public versus private sector, I would say that the private sector is generally further ahead in general than the public sector. And I say that not say that organizations in the public sector don't effectively manage risk, because they do. It's just through observations in the course of activities over the last decade, they haven't adopted formal ERM programs within their organizations. What you'll see typically when you do a scan of public organizations is they've adopted components of risk management programs in some shape or form. However, when you think about, and when it comes to enterprise risk management, I will say that there are pockets within the public sector that have made tremendous advancements in adopting enterprise risk management. And typically, you'll find these organizations in more regulated industries such as healthcare, energy, and now you're beginning to see it in different levels of government. And typically in these organizations, you can see an enterprise risk management program of varying degrees of maturity, depending where they're at on the curve. But typically, some common elements will include, strong board oversight, so strong governance program, management oversight, and linkage to the board is especially there. You'll see some sort of framework of strong processes in how they identify, evaluate risks. And they're not only looking at just actual risks, they've shifted the conversation with their leadership and boards to also look at prospective risks that could occur down the road. You'll also see documented practices, right? You'll see organizations that have mapped out the way and the manner in which they identify, assess, and evaluate risks and the criteria that they use to do that, But also in more mature organizations, you'll see actually an established ERM policy that in best practice needs to be board approved. And when I reflect back in my own organization, when we undertook the refresh of the ERM program a few years ago, we had a strong board buy-in, right? And that buy-in trickled down to senior leadership and led to the establishment of not only the ERM policy, but also cascading the series of activities down through the organization, down to the operations level.
And thank you for sharing that. Yeah, that matches sort of what I've seen. That it's evolving. It is, of course, more challenging in especially in government. There's a lot less flexibility. You can't just change your strategy and avoid certain risks or pull back and go into other areas. Also, for corporations, it's much more focused. So you've got the shareholders as a dominant stakeholder. You've got lots of different stakeholders that are equally important, and so the coming up with metrics and quantification is a little more challenging there. So that definitely is evolving. Ben, if I can move on to you, you work in the healthcare sector. Prior to, your degree in actuarial science, you had a background in biostatistics. How do each of these prepare you for your work?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's certainly a lot of overlaps in biostatistics and also actuarial science. I think, though not entirely similar in the material, I think more than ever before, there's a lot of value in diverse applications of what we learn. There's a ton of value in research, and if you look at both Columbia's actuarial program, along with the Society of Actuaries, you'll see that there's a big push for strategic research. I think for me, doing research in both biostatistics and actuarial science, they've both taught me how to work more independently, try out new things, both of which have really helped me at my work so far.
So that's interesting you share that. Just reminds me, because I'm an actuary by profession. Of course, I'm an ERM professional. But I think that, actuarial science, what I say is that it teaches you how to teach yourself. It gives you the rigor and the discipline. And so it teaches you how to think, and then you can attack any kind of problem. So, yeah, that's interesting that you share that. Thank you. Marshall, the foundation of our ERM program is value-based enterprise risk management, a synthesis between enterprise risk management and value-based management. And this is one of the unique features of the program. Can you briefly, please describe to our audience what that is and explain how it differs from traditional enterprise risk management?
Sure, definitely. So for the value-based ERM concepts and framework, it's really like the unique and the advanced concept I've learned from our whole ERM program. And for the value-based ERM program and the framework, one big difference is the value-based ERM define the risks by sources. So typically, previously, for example, traditional risk mentioned about the reputational risk. So reputational itself is not the root causes of the risk. It's a result of some other instance cause the reputational impact. So under the value-based ERM concept, it requires us to look the risks by the root causes and to identify what caused the reputational impact. So this is one concept under the value-based ERM. Another is value-based ERM defines the risks both as a threat but also the opportunity. So not only look the downside, but also look the upside. This is like the most important part of the risk. So people typically only look the risk as a threat and also the negative way, but we need to look at it as a positive way and try to look at of the whole picture. And comparing with a traditional risk management, it looks the silo risk management. So basically only look the financial risk and operational risk independently. But the value-based ERM require us to look more type of risks, including strategic, operational, cyber, insurance risk, or maybe supply chain risk for some certain industries. But also we try to build a model and do the quantitative way to see the whole picture. We're trying to aggregate all the risks and to see what's the impact of the company's value and what's the risk profile. And in this way, we will have the better understanding and the whole picture of the risk profile and the risk portfolio in the firm. Thank you.
Yeah, very well said. It's interesting. I just want to, I mean, you made a number of important points, but I often say that risk reward is the most common phrase in business. But who's doing it? Usually you have the reward side, the initiatives, the strategic planning, all these, we're going to grow. And you have the risk folks who are always looking at the downside. The two need to come together. The discipline of understanding volatility needs to be flipped around agnostically around what is our strategic plan expectations and how do we figure out what the volatility is around there, how to get a better understanding of it and increase our chances of achieving our strategic plan. That's at the heart of the program. So to be able to inform, being able to inform risk reward decision making, you need both sides of that, and that has been missing. So thank you for sharing that.
Sim, if I can add, as actuaries, I think we are trained very well at looking at what bad things can happen and what is the impact of that. But I think having that more holistic, I liked how Marcel mentioned that it's not just looking at the downside, but looking at the opportunities as well and having that more holistic view. And I think actuaries get a little over-disciplined in finding the negative risk and being sure that they're valuing those, but you do need that step back, and that's really important too. And how are you going to respond and leverage and take most advantage of the positive risk, if you could say, or opportunities that might happen as well. So I think that's a great point, Marcel.
Yeah, thank you for adding that. It's really true. I mean, the discipline of understanding, responding to shock, preparing for the future, looking at trends, that's there. It's just an understanding and appreciation of how to align it to business and to basic capital budgeting and valuation. So that's wonderful. If I could move, excuse me, to John. Can you share with our audience how you've applied the value-based approach to ERM in your work?
Sure. So I'm reflecting on the work we did in my current organization a few years ago. Right, I was brought in to refresh the enterprise risk management framework, and through the course of that work, I was able to apply some of the key concepts associated with the value-based model. So I think it was important from the get-go when we decided that we were going to go down that path, that we needed to refocus the conversation on using ERM and using that to reflect on the impact of value on the organization. We've talked about, the value is at the sort of forefront of what we need to think about when we're going through the ERM process. So we went through an exercise where, we looked at the risks from an integrated approach. Again, that was one of the big changes we instituted as part of the refresh. Is now we didn't look at the risks as silos. We had to look at the risk as one portfolio, if you want to call it that, and its overall impact to the company at the end of the day. And so through that work, we were able to lay down what I like to call some foundational elements of what I would institute as a part of an ERM program that was really appropriate to the size and complexity of the organization. Right. So when I reflect back on the work that we undertook, we laid down the appropriate governance, ensuring that there was appropriate management governance that lined up with the board governance, and through that, the appropriate platforms and mechanisms to report the risk information. And also importantly, and upfront in the process, we linked it back to the strategy, right? To the strategic goals and objectives, and how do the risks pose as a threat to the strategy. But also at the same conversation is, to your point, and in keeping with the conversation a few minutes ago, is where are the sort of upside of the risks? Where can we take calculated risk taking that would actually benefit the company both short term and long term? As part of this effort, we, with management, undertook to put in the right processes in place, a disciplined approach to the way we identified risk, the way we looked at risk and categorized them, the way we assessed them from the impact to the likelihood, but also, again, shifting from not only looking at the risks that we're facing now, but beginning to look at prospective risks, right? The black swans in the world, and how we can actually begin to wrap our head around that and then potentially plan for it from a risk management perspective. And part of the plan, we went through an exercise where we established risk appetite statements that would coincide with each of the risks and linked it back to the objectives, and then began to look at the key risk indicators for each one of those so that the management and board would have a better line of sight to the potential risk exposures or upside of risks as we went through that work. And again, it was formalized again through the establishment of a formal policy with board support.
Thanks for sharing all that. I'm smiling while you're talking because you're sharing a number of points that I talk a lot about. One, and I want to point this out to the audience so they heard exactly some of these points. One is you mentioned customizing an ERM program that's appropriate to the organization, and that's part of what you learn. The next thing that I want to point out, just one other point, was that this is the key to the value base. There's a lot of risk work is more the super downside, which, we need to do it for financial organizations. You need to set capital, define required capital. You need that. But senior executives aren't consumed day to day with the 1 in a million scenarios. They're more interested in what's actionable today. How do I become more likely to succeed in our strategy and our goals there? Because everybody's tied to plan. We got to make plan. Help us do that. And if you're able to put, excuse me, an estimate on that, which we teach you to do here at Columbia, then all of a sudden everyone's interested. That's what value-based is. What do we value as an organization? Let's understand the volatility around that. Now you've got a conversation to engage a senior leadership. So that's, I appreciate your sharing that point. So I wanted to ask you, Marshall, because this happens occasionally. You're an alum of our program, ERM program, but this is your second master's. So your first was in management. What prompted you to get the second master's and to choose specifically our ERM program?
Thank you, Sam. This is very interesting and good question. And I have my unique background. So I complete my first master in management, and I back to China for work, like for almost 2 years. I worked in the headhunting industry, but I realized that was not I'm passionate about. And I really want to work something more strategically related to the company's strategy, and can have more impact and become more influential as a team or as an individual. So I'm thinking education may be the very important turning point for myself to learn more domain knowledge. So that's why I make the decision to pursue my second master. And luckily, I learned a lot of foundational knowledge and also the best practices in the industry, enable me to finally land a job I'm really like and very passionate about. And the reason why I choose the ERM program at Columbia is I was impressed when I looked the programs online. I was impressed by the faculty's background. Most of the faculties, or I would say all the faculties, they are the business leaders, the risk professionals in different areas. So I know I could not only learn the risk knowledge from them, but also learn the latest practices and updates and trainings in different industries. This information are very valuable for me to prepare for my interview and also for my long-term career. And also another side is when I look on the website, I was attracted by the curriculums. For myself, I really want to learn in the non-financial risk areas. We had the different courses, including the strategic risk and also operational risk and the IT risk. So each risk will have one specific courses to teach us. So that was very impressive. And also, I know recently our curriculum have more coding related courses. I think this is really like keep updated with the industry demands, and this always help the students to have more opportunity and more skill sets in demanding in the industry. So I'm really happy and think I'm so lucky to enter the ERM program, become the turning point of my career, and enable me to land my dream job. Thank you.
You showed a lot of different technical aspects. I just want to point out two things. One is you mentioned that we're adding coding. This is one of the strengths. This particular school that we sit in, the School of Professional Studies within Columbia University, is unique, and we are a scholar practitioner model. We're bringing our faculty are virtually all currently still in the market, including myself, Tanya, of course, others. This is what we're doing. We're bringing you. This is not dusty theory. This is current market action. So you will hit the ground running, and we're constantly evolving as it needs to the curriculum and constantly adding courses, and I'm excited about a number of the courses we're going to be adding. But in addition to all the content, technical information you just added, I want, I don't know if a recording of this will be shared, but if people can go back to the earlier part of your comments and look at the twinkle in Marcelle's eye when she said, finally got the job I really enjoyed. Like, that's what we're all after. You know, you want to make an impact. We all want to make the biggest possible positive impact we can make on our companies, on our environment, on the world, and this is a way to do it. So thank you for sharing that. So if I can move to John, within Columbia, both the ERM and the actual program use a scholar practitioner faculty model. How do you feel? I just mentioned that. How do you feel that the model helped you in your studies and in applying the learnings on the job?
So I gotta tell you, Sam, I found the scholar practitioner model to be a real value add when I look at it from a learning perspective, but also accelerating my ability to apply the learnings on the job, right? So you have, through this program, and for the other programs too in SPSS, really access to leading edge practitioners in the industry. And when I enrolled into the enterprise risk management program, I already had a few years of experience, but was looking for that extra edge, that, you know, the extra training that would further my learning in certain areas of risk, but also was looking guidance from leading practitioners on how to effectively apply it. Because typically when you look at in these training programs, that's where usually the gap is, right? We'll do a good job presenting the concepts, but we fall short on how to effectively apply it. So having the access to, I would say, not only risk management faculty through the program, but, you know, I've taken a few electives, has given me the access to other faculty who's not only helped me with my coursework, but also helped me to explore other interests in the areas of risks, and really has broadened my perspective on how I look at risks as I completed the program. And again, these are, I would say, you know, I've met some great individuals who I still keep in touch with today, who still, to this day, still give me advice on real world problems that I encounter.
Yeah, thank you. So I want directing people to the smiles that you're seeing. So look at the smile on John's face. This is what we have here. You know, you have you're born into a family. You have your expanded family with your friends. When you join Columbia, you're part of the Columbia family forever. So it's not just here. We stay in touch. We help you. We learn from you. So it's a relationship that continues. So that's a very important point. I want to ask Tanya. So this is, I think, a particularly interesting question. You have a lot going on. You have a lot of different activities to keep you busy. Tell our audience what attracted you to also take on a teaching role in the actual science program here at Columbia.
Yeah, so when I originally got approached about both developing and teaching the pensions course, I had just finished or was finishing up my time as president of the Society of Actuaries, which was quite a demanding but challenging and rewarding opportunity, in addition to my daytime job. At the time, I was working for a federal regulator. And I thought, well, this would be a really interesting challenge, and I'm going to give it a shot and see what it's like. Then I just really, really enjoyed taking that step back and learning about how to develop a curriculum and teach these concepts. And it was very exciting and very rewarding. Since then, I changed jobs to have the chief actuary's role, and then added a business leadership role. And then I added president of the International Actuarial Association. So I got extremely busy, as you implied in your question. But why did I keep doing it? It was something that you can tell by my history of volunteering in the actual profession. I am very, very passionate about actual science and it as a profession. It is, to me, such a wonderful combination of understanding mathematics, statistics, and risk analysis, but also understanding businesses and understanding regulatory environments and even economics and investments. It just meshes together so many broad areas, and it's, to me, just such an exciting and rewarding career. It certainly has been for me. So I really am passionate about the profession, but I'm also passionate about pensions and the role that actuaries play in providing the support in managing and optimizing that risk within the pension plans. And that's extremely important. The plans that we work with has sponsors that are companies. They can be like Fortune 100 companies. They could be large states. They could be cities. They could be large trust funds to support union employees. They could be a small law firm established in Manhattan. There's just a very large array of these organizations that sponsor the plan. So you get to work with a lot of different folks. Every year when I start my class, I get to go back to the basics and think about, what I'm doing. Why were these plans established? What's their true goal? What are employers and employees trying to get out of these plans? And how can you best go about looking at them and valuing them? And so I get down to the bare bones, and I get to think about the current environment and how things have changed since the last time I taught the class 12 months earlier. And how do I want to change the curriculum and integrate these new ideas and reflect the changes that we've made in valuing the plans with the different models and approaches and assumptions, capital market assumptions, different changes in regulatory environment. In fact, in the middle of the semester, we just had a major change in the way that the rules are being applied. And I have a class this evening that I need to update just based on what was passed last Thursday by our president. So it's very exciting. There's a lot of things that are changing. And I love the interaction with the students and trying to share some of my passion and enthusiasm about what I do and what actuaries do and give them a good taste of it. And Columbia is just such a unique program. When I was president of the Society of Actuaries, I had the privilege of visiting a lot of different universities and talking to students about a career as an actuary. And Columbia was one of those universities, and I just really liked that family kind of atmosphere that you talked about, Sim, but was really impressed at how well they did in connecting their students to the profession and to the professionals. So when you go through that Columbia program, you're not just learning how to pass those exams, which is very important, but I, as an employer, know that when I'm interviewing and we're trying to decide who to hire as an intern and as an employee, we're looking at much more than just those exams. And if you can go in there and express a really good knowledge and understanding of the area that you're interviewing for, you're going to have such an advantage. And I think that's really important. And it just makes me really appreciate the program and I'm very happy and almost proud to be part of it. So it's just a wonderful experience for me. I'm so happy that I got this opportunity and continue to have it.
More smiles. I think you're seeing, this is what I hear also from all my faculty. And there's some, masters of the universe from Wall Street, and they're saying, look, great job. I love my time here, looking into the eyes of helping an organization is cool. When you look into the eyes of a student, you're potentially changing their career path. That's really rewarding, exciting. And you see that in Tanya's eyes, that passion for the content, for the material, certainly, but for people. And the humility, of course, you're hearing from Tanya, who's has shown tremendous leadership in her field, has the humility to say, I'm still learning. Teaching helps me learn. The learning happens this way and this way. It also happens among the students. You are among a cadre of very elite, smart people, and you're going to develop those networks and learn. The learning happens among students as well. So, and also, Tanya mentioned the real time. She's constantly bringing in the changes in regulation or anything that's happening in the real world into the classroom. It's extremely valuable to our students and our alums who still have access to a lot of learnings, and it's continual learning. So if I can go to excuse me, Ben now, and say, okay, doing the job is one thing. We still have to get the job. So can you talk? You're recent graduate, very recent, of the actuarial science program, and started at Milliman just this year. Can you tell us how the degree contributed to your job search and in actually landing the job?
Yeah. Well, I think aside from the curriculum that really prepares us for these exams, there's a ton of resources here within the program itself that really helps you create your own Columbia experience. For me, there's a couple of unique experiences here. We have a pro seminar twice a week where we get guest speakers from the actuarial field. They come in and then they give us the latest industry trends, the latest industry information. I think this is a huge networking booster, but also being able to listen to these industry leaders is just an opportunity you wouldn't have been able to get anywhere else. We also have our own career fair. There are workshops here and there, and there's just a lot of events going on all the time. So there's really no shortage of events. I think since graduating, I still feel very much entangled and part of Columbia. There's just so many alumni from Columbia's actuarial program that I have worked with and that I am currently working with. So that's just such a big takeaway, just one big family here at Columbia.
This does happen a lot. So we have a lot of times students will reach out and say, hey, I'm interviewing at this company. In fact, it just happened yesterday, another email. Okay, I'm interviewing at this company. Can you give some advice? So we set up a call for, I think it's later today, to just go over some tips. But I also was able to say, we have a recent alum that's actually experienced that's working there. Why don't you talk to that individual? It really gets insight into the culture and more advice on specifically how their interview works, and that can really give you a leg up. So again, that network, that family, information is power, and care and contributing is very valuable and touching. So we have that here. I'd like to pose the next question to everybody, and I'll just go around in turn. We're all well aware of how the pandemic has impacted us, but I thought I'd ask each of you to share an aspect of the impact on your particular area of practice and how the enterprise risk management or risk management practices have helped. Tanya, can we start with you?
Yes. So again, my area of focus is pension plans, and the way pension plans work is generally when a participant retires, they're going to get a payment in the form of an annuity, which means they'll get a payment as long as they're alive. And the first thing everyone thinks about when they think about the pandemic is its impact on mortality. In fact, we recently had some study results revealed in the US that indicated that the longevity of individuals has decreased as much as 3 years, depending on your demographics. But that is not the first and the primary impact that we're seeing on pension plans in the US, because the demographics of participants in the pension plans is different than the general demographics in the country. What we have seen is more volatility in the markets. All of these plans have a very significant amount of assets in the billions that back these pension plans. And so the volatility in the markets is very important because it can impact the ability for the plan sponsor to pay for the benefits. But what we've really seen is the impact on what we call the workforce, the employees that these pension benefits are to be provided for, and the employers and the companies and the states and the cities who are having to make really hard decisions or about how they're managing their workforce, or they're seeing changes made by their workforce, such as the plans that cover teachers and the teachers who are deciding that they're going to retire. They have had enough, or they're going to get through this year, but that's going to be the end of it. I, in fact, have 3 close friends who, based on understanding, based on what's happened, they're actually going to accelerate their retirement. So you're seeing a lot of workforce management. There's also the impact of how the company is doing and their ability to put funds toward keeping their business afloat versus funding this pension plan that they've also chosen to sponsor. So it's been very complicated. In addition, I've had to worry about the interoperations of the company and whether my employees have the right technology and ability to connect, and whether we're keeping them motivated and stimulated with all of the different things and informed of all the changes that are happening. Like I mentioned, the recent change in the regulations for the corporate plans that happened just last week. So it's been quite challenging. The good news is that our mortality assumptions have a very far reach, and they also cover a different demographic, and we're not convinced yet that we're too far off in the assumptions that we have been modeling all along. There'll maybe eventually some tweaks to those, but because we have such a long future, as you implied earlier, Sim, in the way that we're looking at these plans years and years into the future, we are not expecting a lot of impact from the mortality aspect. The market aspect is still out. In fact, for now, we're hearing the word inflation again, which we have not heard as a issue in the U.S. in quite some time. So we're monitoring that very closely to see how that's going to develop, and if that's another risk that we need to make sure that we're modeling correctly with our plans. So it's an exciting and interesting time.
It definitely painted a good picture of how interesting it is. And I think when people are listening to Tanya, I hope they're hearing there's a lot of complexity. and being able to understand the multi-dimensional interactivity of different things acting on a financial system over long periods of years, that's really challenging and exciting. There's very few people that know how to do it the right way. So learning that and applying it is very interesting. A broader comment, you're making me remember, we have a lot of course, panels that we put on at Columbia. One of them I did with my colleague Basil Rabinowitz on, so actuary, I'm an actuary by trade, but an enterprise risk management professional thinking about the pandemic. Not that anybody predicted when it would occur. We all know it was possible, but these are not as big surprises to folks that think about this. And actuaries and enterprise risk management people think about it. And in the panel discussion we had, I surveyed the past insurance clients I've had, and they all, of course, think about pandemic scenarios. And typically, the credible worst case pandemic scenario is based on, 100 years ago, 1918 Spanish flu, and we're roughly seeing in the order of magnitude that kind of event now. In fact, I had one client call me up after the pandemic started, and he said, "Look, horrible news, but on the upside, this is playing out with a lot of the detail in terms of what would the economy do and what would our different products do and how would we react." So he said we're pretty much on par. And you heard Tanya say that, where the assumptions behind this, you're not that surprised, which arms you to be able to respond to shock, which is what we're talking about, in a much better way ahead of your competition. When something like this happens to all boats in the ocean, right? It's more how we navigate our ship and can move more quickly and nimbly and get back safely to port. So
if I could just quickly add, I was talking to a group of actuaries that's on the executive committee for the International Actuarial Association. So we had represented many companies across the globe as well as many practice areas. And one person said, what we don't want to get lost from all of this is the understanding that all of the insurers, which is mostly where actuaries work, we haven't seen any of them fail. They understood and they knew that this was a small probability, but certain probability of this pandemic happening. And they've been able to shift and adjust, and they have the right reserves and the right models to be able to do it. The biggest challenge has been to get good data, because actuaries always need data. And the data has been very fluid, very different, sometimes not reliable, slow coming, that type thing. But look at how the industry overall has fared during this pandemic. And I think that's very telling of the profession and its outlook in general. Thank you.
It's a good overall comment in terms of responding to shock. You do look at the history. Insurance companies have a very good track record of surviving. And that's, similarly, I mean, there are a lot of regulation in all financial services, but actuaries are unique. And I think that they do play a good, strong role in helping protect and contributing to that track record of survival for insurance companies. If I could move now, and I just looking at the clock, I know our audience looks like we have 2 minutes left. We are going to go a little bit longer, having a good conversation, so please, hopefully you'll stay with us just a few minutes long. A couple of things I want to get to. Ben, can you comment on this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Tanya makes a lot of good points, and being in the actuarial field, it requires us to be prepared for such events. And as Tanya mentioned before about the importance of mortality information, this sort of data really provides us with relevant information about the health of the population. But I think more importantly, it really goes down to how we are able to provide better services as a whole. Right? During my time here at Columbia, I got to work with the Society of Actuaries on researching and looking at the leading contributions to mortality. I think what this research really highlights is the importance of what we're doing. Now, as for how COVID has affected my time here at Columbia, I think having recently graduated, I spent half of my time in person and the other half online. And really, there was a seamless transition from in-person to online learning. And it's really just similar to what we're experiencing right now from work from home. The only exception is that we're substituting meetings with lectures instead. But I think all in all, it's a really positive experience as a whole, and it still allows for a lot of interaction.
Ben, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was just on a call last week with one of our adjunct faculty who works at an extremely large, successful bank. And he said he was so impressed with how our school was able to pivot in 48 hours and go completely online. And of course, now we have hybrid then very, very quickly after that. is so efficient. He told the CEO, "Hey, they're doing it like this. Why can't we?" And he said they were behind. So he was very impressed with that. So thanks for pointing out how it affected your experience at Columbia. And Marshall, can you add any thoughts?
Yes, sure. So like our team is from technology risk. So like the pandemic, the COVID have the impact on the people's life and also the company's operations. So all the firms move like working remotely. We're all working from home. I think like basically this week should be the 1 year anniversary, like most of us working from home. So after the changes happened, the companies need, like the risk team, our team really need to be well prepared for what will happen. So we need to manage the risk proactively. For example, to bring your own devices. We need to make sure like your devices is secured. And also for the technology, we need to make sure technology is available and also stable for all the employees to use and also for us to serve clients. And most importantly, about the sensitive information and data privacy. So as like the big financial institutions, all the information is sensitive. We need to take the actions and controls in place to make sure we work and we're operating safely and in a secure way. So I do think like from the risk professional, this pandemic like emphasize more about the position and the importance of the risk team and how companies need to do the risk management, not only reactively, but also proactively, like in the long term.
Yeah, that's a good point. As part of the ERM profession, it teaches you to think about a structure and create one so that you're prepared. So when things shift, and things are always shifting, you can dynamically think through, all right, these are the other factors that relate, how things are moving. Here's some, you don't have as many unforeseen consequences because you already thought it through in your structure. So you can think through, okay, this, and this may be impacted. So now we know we're working at home. There's other additional risks in terms of technology, having the technology, the security of it, and thinking that through. So it's a great example. If I can go to John, just some comments on this before we move to the one last question we have for the panel. So we'll probably go another 5 minutes after this.
Sure. So last year at the start of the pandemic, I was really able to work with our senior leadership team because I had a oversight of the enterprise risk management program, but also the emergency management program for the organization. And through this, we were able to apply risk management practices, I would say on the ground risk management practices, as we had an emergency operations center that worked in tandem with the city EOC. And one of the areas where we applied risk management practices was through the initial scenario planning. Right, so we will recall last spring, little was known about the virus or how this pandemic was going to play out. So we undertook the exercise of identifying some high impact scenarios and putting together the risk mitigation strategies for each one. So we looked at scenarios where we would have a severe staff shortage, where a certain portion of our staff would fall ill, and what would we do? And we looked at different redeployment strategies for staff that included both looking at internal and external resources. We looked at the personal protective equipment, the supplies, right? So we knew that our staff were in the buildings across the 500 buildings in the portfolio, and we needed to give them supplies and make sure they were safe. So making sure that they had the right supplies, that we as a company also secure the right supply chain through the process. We looked at matters such as the health and safety protocols. Like, we looked back a year ago, little is known on what was effective, what was not. So making sure that whatever we did was in alignment with public health measures and practices, and that we sourced the appropriate materials that allowed us to deliver that. And last but not least, when we think about our tenants, there's 120,000 of them, to ensure that they had the right supports in place. So we actually conducted, as part of our risk mitigation strategy, was literally door knocks and wellness checks, that we went through each and every household and took an inventory of support and arranged it for those tenants who identified as needing help. So we, on the ground, it was an application of risk management strategies that cut right across the portfolio and to a certain extent across the city.
Yeah, great example. And one of the things you mentioned was thinking through realistic, holistic scenarios, how things would actually play out in the market, but also in our company or different parts of the company. That's important, not stress tests. Those give limited value. More valuable is the holistic scenarios, and I think that leads to a lot of actions at the right time, as you suggested. So one last question. We can quickly go around the group. What advice do you have for prospective students. Marshall?
Yes. So I really have like tons of advices to share, but given the time limit, I'm going to share the most important one. So for all the prospective students, my suggestion is to making full use of your resources available or around you. For myself, my experience tells like the first about the faculties and alum resources. I ask for coffee chat, info session, or like the meeting with our faculties. No one say no, like they never say no. They're all reachable and very helpful and very nice. Make you full use of the office hour to ask your questions and also have the appointment with them to ask more about your careers. Even alum, they are very helpful for me. Like they refer me to the job opportunities and help me to prepare my interviews and the industry informations. So this is one very important resources for all the students. The second is about the career design lab. So I was an intern there when I was student. I took advantages of that. So I had all my mock interviews prior to my like the official interviews, and it helped me a lot to practice, to reflect, and to be confident in my formal interviews. And another resources is about events, like today's panel talk. So our school and ERM program have many handful events, invited the professionals, the expertise to share their knowledge and experience. So they all available for us. The most important is how you make full use of this. And the last is make full use of the opportunities in class. So we had so many presentations and also the group works. Try to use this opportunity to practice your presentation skills, the team working spirit, and also to use the knowledge you've learned in the class and apply them to the practices and the real business cases. So this is my suggestion. So make full use of your resources available around you.
Thank you, Marshall. John?
So my advice to prospective students is to connect with faculty and fellow current students and alum, right? So you've got a feedback from us as a panel. Connect with faculty and alum and students. I think you'll get real feedback on what their experience has been on the program, but also when you decide to enroll into the school, and I've said this before, your career starts from day one, the moment you start the Columbia program. And so with that, access to resources and build lasting relationships, because this is only one chapter of your long career. So it'll go a long way when you keep those relationships after you leave Columbia.
Thank you, John. Ben?
Yeah, I'm gonna also say just being able to network with a lot of individuals outside of class. Also, just try to meet as many people as possible. It's really a special environment filled with a lot of great resources and a lot of opportunity to network. So take advantage of that, but also have a lot of fun. Time goes by really quickly in the program.
Let's not forget fun. Thank you. Then Tanya.
Yeah, and just to add, not to repeat what others have said, just think about when you are trying to get that internship or that first job, know the industry that you're interviewing with, understand what they do and what they need and what the trends and current issues are and what their focus is. And so when you have that interview, they're not just learning about you, but they're understanding that you understand them. And you're not just looking for a job. You're looking for a job with them, a career with them, more importantly. And that can really show through. And I think that's why Columbia has such a strong program, is they're going to help you be best positioned to do that, because you've met these professionals, you've had courses that help you understand that. And you can really express that in the interview, is that not only do you want a job as an actuary, but you want a job as an actuary and a career with them and what they do specifically. So I think that's something important to remember. And don't forget the importance of communication ever, ever, ever. We have most of our actuaries are consultants. They are frontline dealing with CFOs, CIOs, heads of HR, heads of businesses. And you need to be able to communicate, not as an actuary, but as a business partner. And so that is not just how you put a presentation together, but how you write the memos, how you write the emails, and of course, how you conduct yourself in meetings. Super important.
Very important point. Thank you, Tanya. So we're going to close now. I want to thank our panel again for taking the time to share some great insights with us today. Our next Frame Your Future event will be Building Equity in a Post-Pandemic World this coming Thursday, March 18 at 6 p.m. Please mark your calendars. Thank you for joining us, and be well.